Yeah.
What's the expectation that you have as a woman?
Yeah. So I think a very obvious one that I think women experience is sort of the household chores slash cleaning slash cooking, which we kind of mentioned a little bit earlier. And I think that growing up too, like in my household, I feel like my mom sort of my parents sort of like expected me to support them with that too. And so I grew up with that sort of like expectation. But I think in terms of like how I feel about it, I think that it should definitely be more equal. I think that there's a lot of labor, unseen labor, I think that goes into that I think people don't really like understand. So I previously had partners where that was the expectation. Like as a woman, I would have to wash the dishes and oftentimes cook for both people. And so I think I naturally default to that. And so in my relationship with KDo, at the beginning, especially, I did default to that, and especially just on a day-to-day basis, I would not question it. But I think more recently, especially with just running an organization, like I get tired a lot. And so I've been really reflecting on like, is it possible for me to get support with some of these things? Can I ask for that? And so I did surface that with KDo, I think like pretty early on. Um,
I don't even remember us talking about it, to be honest. I thought like we were always just kind of fluid with it. Like, you know, I thought, you know what? I think where things got really specific was taking out the trash. Like that was like more like hey, you should take out the trash like fully.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think there's like certain expectations that like we have for each other, but yeah, that's definitely one of them. But I do recall us having, or maybe it's more because it's a thought that I have oftentimes in my brain that I have to think about it a lot more and then actually like surface it. So maybe that's why I feel like there's a lot of energy being put into thinking about that because there's a lot of unlearning that I have to do.
Hmm.
And thinking like, oh, it's not something that I need to do on my own and it's okay to actually like ask for like help. Um,
So that's interesting. There is like the internal work around dismantling the story and the role in your head and how much attention is placed on that. And then there's also like um, the reality of like what the balance looks like between the both of us. And I think what I'm hearing is like, even if the balance is like relatively like there, making the ask, um, yeah, I think that it makes you feel a certain type of way too. It's just because like it's something that you're trying to like break out of.
yeah.
I don't know if that lands right though, but you tell me.
Yeah, I mean, I also think that it's like the fact that I even have to like verbalize some of these things, right, is inherent like in why I think this is an issue to begin with. 'Cause like it should be something that is like shared.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying particular to you, but just in past relationships that I've had.
Mm-hmm.
But it like I definitely feel like it's more balanced here, but there was a time when it wasn't. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I was just trying to highlight like the load of
Yeah.
like the effort behind the scenes. Um, yeah, because like one of the things that we highlighted for this session is like the pressure, the pressure of being in these gender roles, um, and the pressure around like unwinding them as well. Um, okay, so I guess I can talk about one of mine. You want to ask me the question?
Yeah, what are one of the expectations that you feel you have the pressure of having to uphold?
Um, well, one of them is having a stable income, um, and like providing. I think providing is the highest level, but stable income, um, yeah, I just feel like I gotta I understand part of this is like privilege too, but like I feel like I gotta stay in my current job to be able to have a stable income so that like I can build for the wealth, like our future wealth. Um, and sometimes I don't know, I don't know if I could actually just throw everything away and like pursue like my dreams full in, like all in, you know? Um, so that's kind of like something that was weighing on me. And I think in our relationship, like you as an entrepreneur, like there's seasons of income. And um, I remember like for the first year of our relationship, like it was, which is literally like over this past year, it was hard. It was hard because it was like, how do I communicate to you that I want to be able to like go to bat for my own dreams one day? And that there's like a pressure I feel, and how can we work together to create more of a balance in terms of like pulling income in. Um, so I think I'll stop there and see if you had anything to say. But those are like that was my initial experience.
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious because I mean, Brian in the chat said relatable. I'm curious, you know, between how long was it between when you felt the pinch of like, oh, I may have to like hold out a little longer on like my own like dreams versus like you communicating it with me, because I
Mm,
feel like that's something that like it doesn't have to, I think for everyone it doesn't have to be necessarily this specific example, but there's always this like thing that it doesn't work for you, or there's an expectation that you have, but it's not something that you want to keep upholding. So the only thing that we can really do is to communicate it. And so I'm wondering if you can share a little bit more about what that process was like and when you decided to actually like surface it.
yeah. I mean, I think it took me like at least 4 or 5 months into our relationship because I felt like I also wanted, to be this is kind of tied into another expectation, which is like to make sure that things are going to be okay. And because I have the pressure of making sure that I want to make sure that things are okay, that we have good control over our situation, I was trying to do like everything, which is like a lot of things, which is like, I want to support your dreams. I want to endure that. I understand the risks with that. And I don't want to ask for you to make more money quickly because I could, the entrepreneur life, it's never guaranteed, right? Like, and when like things are going to pop off like crazy. So, I think for me, it was like taking on the load of, how do I say it? Like doing the emotional labor and basically just not talking about like how I would want you to have a little bit more of a stable stream of income to lessen like the pressure that I feel, or at least to just start that conversation. I don't remember how we started that conversation, but I know that it took me a while to get there because I didn't want to be painted as like a bad partner or as like someone who didn't support your dreams or as someone who like, um, yeah, like I have a stable job, like, sure, like, why don't I take a page out of your book and just go do it, So that's kind of like what was going through my head.
Yeah, I think like just wanting to highlight, I think that there's a lot of, I think like processing that you were doing on your own, like before you actually talk to me at all, like about it, and really wanting to recognize like how much effort I think was put into that, because I feel like those are things that I will never really like understand, but wanting you to know that I see that.
Thanks. Yeah, we're doing pretty good. Um,
Pretty good now. I think for a while it was really hard.
yeah, it was pretty hard.
Yeah, it's I think money is just such a sensitive
Yes.
like topic. And I just appreciate that you were very thoughtful about it. And I also think that like I'm really grateful that we've moved beyond that because I think the points in which you did surface it were actually, even though they were really hard conversations, I think brought a lot of connection and deepening, I think, in our relationship. I feel like I don't know about you, but I feel like in a lot of relationships, it's like, oh, we want to like avoid having a problem at all. And sometimes it's just like, let's not like rock the boat. But I feel like where we're moving towards is just like, let's be proactive about like surfacing things often and early so that like we can tackle it head on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Cool. Why don't you, what's another expectation you have?
Um, I think as a woman, I do feel that I don't say woman too. I think like the feminine sort of energy, the expectation is that you're very comfortable in your like softness and also to be vulnerable and also to be inherent in that is just like also like emotionally supportive. And I think that um I think that I am uh emotionally supportive and how I feel about it is like I mean I feel very confident in my ability I think to be supportive um but I think what I would have liked to see especially with a lot of guys not particularly to you I think but like in previous relationships that was like very clearly missing and you know people who are able to like emote like to share their feelings and to like surface things like quickly and like I mentioned like early on um that I think is what I would like I think
Yeah.
in my partner.
Imbalance.
Yeah, but I think that like in it, with past partners it was not it was clear that that was like a problem. um but I think with you in particular I do think that you're very emotionally supportive. But I think like with you, I experience sort of this like when you share, when you emote, it's kind of like a pendulum. So it's either like you kind of don't like at all about things that you're like struggling with, but then when you do, it's like a lot, like all at once, which I imagine is like part of like holding on to things and stuff like that. And so I feel like sometimes swinging in that pendulum um can just be very disorienting.
Yeah.
So like when I do emotionally support you, I feel like I'm kind of doing it in like lots of bursts, versus like very like regularly. And so, um, yeah, that's I'll pause there because I do feel like that's like an observation that I've made, especially more actually from the beginning of our relationship, but especially more recently we've had more conversations around
Yeah, I mean, I like the pace that we're going at. I think what I'm noticing is that gender roles impact how your patterns are in a relationship. And like for sure, if I stack my chips on the table of like my gender roles, like the pressure to lead, the pressure to make decisions, the pressure to keep things together and like to make sure that like we're set up for success and the pressure to provide and all those things like sometimes they get entangled and it leads me to do like a lot of the processing work by myself and like it becomes hard for me to actually like recognize that i I got to talk about it, you know? And so then that's why it kind of swings on a pendulum where um sometimes there's just challenges in relationships where like there isn't like an immediate solution. Um and I feel like it's not productive to talk about those things or like how I'm feeling if it's been talked about already. But when we finally talk about it, when I say those things, like I realized that it was necessary, you know, like I shed a tear, many, probably like many tears. And Steph, you know, she's always there to like um take care of me. And so yeah, so I guess like another expectation is the one around leading. That's something that's one where I feel like, you know, in my default state, I don't want to make any decisions. I just want to float around, live my life. And I don't know if it's because I'm like a Libra and I just like to go with the flow. You know, sometimes I want a stable job. I have a stable job. Other times I'm like, fuck this. I don't want a stable job. But then the stable job gives me income and I don't really need to worry about things because like I have a good enough amount of money to like provide for myself. But then there's another part of me that's like, ah shit, like I want to go after my truths, my like things that I'm really passionate about, you know? So I kind of like go back and forth on this and it drives stuff crazy. Um, but yeah, I think like decision making in particular has been like a sensitive thing for me over time that I've talked to with Steph, because I feel like in society, like men have to be like sure of themselves. They have to know and be like certain or at least make a decision and to lead and all that stuff. But you know, for me, like that's not my default state. That's not my forte. And so like how do I collaborate with Steph to take the pressure off, to not and to also like not beat myself up for being the person that for judging myself as like a bad decision maker. And so like a lot of the work that we've done in our relationship is to actually it, it has to do with decision making and planning. Um, we've been basically just like she's been helping me like just remind myself that I'm not a bad planner. I just kind of like think about too many possibilities sometimes, which is tied to decision making, you know. But like we've learned to tease out each other's strengths around like, for example, when we plan, um, I like to do the macro thinking in terms of like let me choose all the options and like where things should be, and then she likes to do like the micro plan. Her forte is more with the micro in terms of like, all right, once like the general itinerary is there, like let's figure out how to sequence this and stuff. Now, recognizing our strengths, I try to make the effort to be like, hey, can we shift those from time to time? Can I do like more heavy lifting with the micro stuff? But you know, like I think that's kind of a language we had to develop and continue to develop and check in with each other over time, because um effort is a love language, and if it feels imbalanced in whatever like exchange that is, this is so Libra of me, then like it can cause some hard feelings. So yeah, I think I just wanted to say all that by letting everyone here know that like my journey to taking off the pressure off this archetype of leading um has been like so much. I owe so much of it to Steph, because um yeah, she just lets me like not be so hard on myself, and then when I'm not as hard on myself, I can come out of it and actually like come back. You know, there's seasons for leadership and we play different roles.
I love that you said. I was just thinking about the strengths thing, Kira, because I feel like the reason why I think we flow very easily is because we leave a lot of room, I think, for each other. And I think that there's a lot of compassion. And I think part of the work when we're thinking about a partnership is not just like, hey, there's something wrong with you, or there's something like, here, you can't make decisions, like there's something wrong with you, you should work on it. But I think there's also just like, how can another person, when you see somebody who's has a specific type of like weakness or it's not their strength, how can we help balance that, and how can you also not just help make the decisions, which is also my forte, but also like affirm that it's not necessarily a bad thing. And that's like I think the work that both of us sort of do for each other in different dimensions that helps sort of like take away the shame, I think, that we feel about not being able to like show up a certain way because of that expectation.
Yeah, totally.
Well,
We're at
um
30, so yeah.
I
Should
know.
we?
Yeah, I think we can share quickly like the last one. So the last one that I was thinking about in terms of expectation, I mentioned it earlier, but having children. So I think for a very long time, uh I mean, I felt like I was indoctrinated into this idea from birth, right? And I think it's all around us. But I think it became so much more clear to me after my previous relationship where I thought I was gonna like have kids and get married, have kids, and I realized like, oh shit, this is not actually something that I necessarily like care for in a certain stage. And it felt like almost a move to like help salvage, I think, a relationship. And so I think once I thought about that, I had to sit with like what's behind wanting to have children and also questioning what's behind why a potential partner would also want to have children. And I think that that's sort of the energy that I was coming into, like in between like KDo and I actually like starting to date. There were other folks that I was having conversations with that I started realizing like, oh, people just are doing this because it feels it's like the thing that they were told, I think, to do. And I really just and I think there's nothing wrong with wanting to have children. I think it's just for me just thinking about being more intentional about what's behind, I think, the desire for that. And I think this current state, I don't feel strongly about it. And I think I feel very lucky that my parents are not particularly strong about it either. And I think when I first started, when KDo and I dated, that was a conversation that we had pretty early on. And I just wanted to be clear and explicit about I what my expectations were so that he didn't go in if he wanted to have kids with a misalignment. And so yeah, do you remember that conversation? How did you feel when I told you?
I don't remember it. I think I mean I think we've talked about it like just it's just in our casual conversations that I don't remember like a particular moment, but my stance has always been the same. Like I'm like 60-40, like wanting kids and not really like wanting kids. So like it's not like a burning desire for me either. Um so yeah, I think that's why we've been able to work out because it's like I'm not dying to have a kid, you know? Like I've seen us try to take care of a dog and I'm like, "Oh my God, like we got to take it out, go poop twice a day." Like I pick up no one's shit, you know? Like I literally pick up your dog shit. So,
Hey, yeah,
like it's like stuff like that. So I'm like, yeah, I am good.
yeah. Well, I did appreciate something you did say to me at the very beginning, which was like, you just told me ultimately it was my decision. And I
Mhm.
think that's not something that I necessarily received or felt, I think, with other people that I've dated before. And it always felt like an expectation, always felt like, oh, you have to have kids with me, you have to have kids with me in the next couple of years because that's my timeline.
Mhm.
um and I always felt a little bit disrespected and not um I just didn't feel like I was part of the conversation when I think people have conversations like that. It's not really a conversation, it's just like a request basically, which I think is not fair, considering that I my body is the one carrying the child. So yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
It's pretty simple. Um, yeah.
If only the rest of the world knew that.
Yeah. I think what, if I were to go a little bit further, and like sometimes I do get FOMO because like all my friends are starting to have kids now, and I'm like, oh man, like what would it be like to have a kid one day, like, and sometimes you and I talk, we're like, yeah, we would both, you'd be like, oh, you'd be a really good dad, I'd be like, yeah, you'd be such a good mom, and I would like, I kind of like fantasize about it. I'm like, oh, that'd be really cool, but then I'm just like, I take Noah out for a walk, and I'm just like, I'm good. Like in my current stage of life right now, and I think like I'm just trying to keep an open mind and go with the flow with life. Can't really predict things.
Yeah.
Yeah.